Welcome back to Penn State Sports Night. I'm Emily Treacy, along with Brooke Steach and Jeremy Ganes, here to talk about Penn State's first win of the season against Michigan this past weekend. Not only does the victory end the Nittany Lions' worst start in program history, but it's also the first win at Ann Arbor since 2009. Now, looking at what this means for the future, there's been some speculation about what a losing season would mean for James Franklin. Do we think this win has bought him some time, maybe another season, or is he out no matter what?
Emily, I think that this has obviously been a very tough season for Penn State to lose their first 5 games. Obviously, it's not something that's never happened before. But as shocking as that is, he will be back next season. There's a confluence of factors that make that so. His buyout is very large, and Penn State's just not the kind of university with its athletic program that's going to be interested in taking on all that money with the amount of time he has left on his contract. Also, you kind of have to build in the COVID excuse with the pandemic going on. Obviously, every other team is dealing with it. Penn State's not alone in that, and I think that goes without saying. But it has created some challenges for teams, and it's hard to measure just how difficult dealing with the pandemic during this season has made going about the regular routine. So I think that comes into play as well. And in general, I just don't think you're going to be able to bring in a substantially better coach if you were to get rid of James Franklin right now. I think the best option is to just ride it out. Now, if you had a similar season next year where Penn State is also at the basement of the Big Ten again and really struggling and not competing for a Big Ten title at the very least, I think then you're probably looking at them parting ways. But that's a long way off. But so right now, I don't think James Franklin's going anywhere.
Yeah, Jeremy, I'm definitely going to have to agree with you there. I mean, considering that Penn State just guaranteed James Franklin $38.5 million over a 6-year contract to 2025, I just feel like, with everything, the circumstances going on this year, Penn State can't afford to just let go of that contract. And going back to these uncertain circumstances going on in recent press conferences, James Franklin has talked about having 39 false positive tests on the team, which, we're not the only school and team going through these problems, as you stated, but it definitely is affecting our practice squad, how he has to rearrange everything like we have been seeing in the games. And I think what some people are forgetting too is that James Franklin is one of the top recruiting coaches in the whole Big Ten. And with all of these unknown circumstances, players getting hurt, players opting out, I think that, if he really takes his time into recruiting this year, like he has been, it will be very successful. And hopefully we can get our team back on track to where we were before.
On the topic of recruiting, Franklin took some heat for his 2021 recruiting class. Freshman running backs Keziah Holmes and Kevon Lee have stepped up after the slew of injuries took out the top runners on the team. How have these two Lawn boys kept the run game afloat?
Well, I think the biggest thing with this running game is early in the season, you weren't really expecting these freshmen to have to come in and be the lead of the running game. You knew that you had the talent there and that eventually you might phase them into having bigger roles in this offense. But I don't think this coaching staff probably envisioned them having to be the top couple backs this early in the season and from really most of the 2020 season. Noah Cain obviously is one of the best short yardage backs in college football. They had eight touchdowns last year. He very quickly became unavailable after getting hurt against Indiana in the first game, and Journey Brown hasn't played it down this year because his college career is now over, unfortunately. So you're talking about these guys having to come in and make a big impact earlier than expected. Now they're talented, but it took a few weeks for them to really establish themselves and show how good they really are and why they were recruited highly. These running backs have become more decisive as the year has gone on. You really saw it in this game against Michigan. Kevon Lee had 134 yards and a touchdown on 22 carries and really carried the load. And overall, it was a very productive running game for Penn State. Keziah Holmes had a few powerful runs as well. They just have really been able to improve their vision in the running game and make better decisions in terms of which gaps to hit and how quickly to make those decisions when they get the ball. and because of that, the mental aspect of the game is coming to them a little bit more naturally now. They're able to use their speed, and everything just looks a little bit more fluid and a little bit more natural in that running game. So it's been a progression really that has improved over the last few weeks.
Yeah, again, I'm just going to have to agree with you. I mean, Kayvon Lee, he stood out to me tremendously because, like you said, he had 22 carries, 134 yards, and a touchdown. And not only did Holmes step up too, but he really stepped up to the plate for not just this game, but it was almost like a must-needed win game. I mean, Penn State did not want to go 0-6, and they wanted to get that start and get that win against Michigan. A lot of people were unsure how the game was going to go, but I think it was great how he stepped up as a freshman. He really allowed the blocks to set him up right in front of him. And Keziah Holmes, I mean, he had 10 rushing attempts while following 34 yards for the game. I think, like I said, he was a much needed spot for a freshman to step up to this game. It was great to see him do what he had to do to get the team to win.
Penn State definitely seemed a lot more in control in this game than in past games this season. What adjustments did the Nittany Lions make to take down the Wolverines?
Well, as I sort of stated before, I feel that there was really a lack of determination and drive ever since Penn State fell short to Indiana the first game of the season. You know, while it was a huge upset, I feel that while the players and coaches were receiving so much hate on social media and generally the media all over, the players and the coaches lacked drive and confidence to me. And I think the offense took more chances that were successful down the field, and the defense definitely held down. Every piece in the puzzle of the team worked together this game, and that's something I haven't seen all working out together in the past previous games this season so far. And if this play was happening earlier in the year, maybe we wouldn't have lost to, to be easier matchups or had the game so close coming down to one call at the end of the game. Like I stated before, as many key players have opted out or got year-ending injuries, if we had all of our key players together without all of these unfortunate circumstances, I feel that our record would obviously be probably a lot different than where we're at right now, being 1-5. But now that we have some freshmen that can handle these key roles as we see every game, I'm hoping that Penn State can play just like they did against Michigan while making these important adjustments to the roster so we can find out what other players can actually do. And I think it's really important for everyone to know that this is definitely a rebuilding year for Penn State football.
I think the biggest problem that has plagued Penn State so far is the from a mental standpoint, the ability to move on from an unfortunate incident or a bad play. It's been a real series, just what feels like an endless series of misfortunes for Penn State. I guess you could say that it started with Devin Ford not stopping short of the goal line in the Indiana game. Then, of course, the controversial call at the goal line with Indiana going for the 2-point conversion, and then injuries and so on and so forth. It just all kind of spiraled from there. And from a coaching standpoint, I don't feel that Penn State necessarily got control of the team's attitude when those things happen, and they really let it get to them. And that also speaks to how Sean Clifford handled a lot of his interceptions and his mistakes with the ball, which there have been many. And it just gives you this whole picture that Penn State has really dwelled on the bad things that have happened instead of being able to move on to the next play. And on top of that, Penn State just has kind of lacked its Nittany Lion identity, if you will, this season. The things that they've become known for, effectively running the ball in early downs and setting up its passing game. They hadn't really done that until this game against Michigan, when obviously we talked about it before. Kayvon Lee was really effective at running the ball and allowed that intermediate pass game over the middle of the field to really set itself up. And that was even without Pat Freiermuth, who's out for the season. Penn State was really able to pick apart the Michigan secondary in this game. That's something that they've just really struggled with in general this year. And of course, this is a team that we know for having its defense, being able to take away the ball from the opponent and turn them over and give it back to their own offense. That's something that they haven't done until the Michigan game. So they kind of rediscovered their identity against Michigan from a lot of different aspects. And that was important for winning this game. And it'll be important for them to continue to pick up a few more wins this year. This team is perfectly capable of playing the way it did in the first 5 games, but Michigan might serve as a turning point if they continue to have that type of mental focus that they showed against the Wolverines.
Now, looking at next week's matchup against Rutgers, Penn State will need to have that same intensity and heart in order to have its first win streak of the season. Though Rutgers has not beat Penn State since '88, they've given some of the top teams in the Big Ten a good run for their money this season. Can the Scarlet Knights pull off this upset?
You know, Emily, I feel that this season is so unknown and predictable. I mean, going into every game, you never know what to consider a threat at this point. Obviously, from this season, you never know who's going to show out, who's going to be replaced on a reserve list, and who is willing to put up a fight to the end of the game. But I would consider Rutgers a threat just because they have put up a good fight this year by defeating Michigan State and recently Purdue. And Rutgers barely lost to Michigan State this year, 48-42. And Illinois is 23-20. And you mean, they did lose to Ohio State 49-27, but as stated, Rutgers knows how to put up a fight until the end of the game, clearly, which could be a major problem for Penn State if they don't keep up that intensity.
What makes this Rutgers team different from past years, and who are some key players to look out for?
I think the biggest difference, and probably the most obvious difference, is the coaching staff and who's really helming this Rutgers program. In the past, it's just frankly been total incompetence, and this team has not really competed within this conference. They just haven't looked like they belong. But now Greg Schiano is back. He's the one who brought them to prominence just before they joined the Big Ten, and now he's here again. And he has them competing in pretty much every game. You know, the Ohio State game, you can give them a pass because it's just the Buckeyes and everybody else in this conference. We've known that for a while. But they've competed in plenty of other games, and you know, the recruiting will definitely come along as the years go by. We can already see that they've jumped up significantly from last year to this year, and even early in next year's cycle, there's a big improvement there as well. So, you know, they lack the talent right now to necessarily win all of these games, but you can see they have the heart, they have the focus to stay competitive in ways that they never would have in previous years. And also, I look at their big play wide receiver that they have. This is an offense that is actually somewhat dangerous. It's not anything crazy, but it's much better than what they've had in the past. Bo Melton is their top guy in that receiving game, and he's had big games against Illinois and Michigan, over 100 yards in each of those games. So, you know, Penn State has sometimes struggled with one or two receivers in games where maybe you didn't expect them to lose, but they end up letting that team stay in the game anyway. Michigan State, I think Cordero Stewart was the receiver's name for Michigan State in those losses that they have had under Franklin when they went on the road and just couldn't stop some of those receivers that they had. You know, that's a player that I look for that potentially could give Penn State trouble, because that secondary is one of the weaker units on the defense for the Nittany Lions.
We'll have to wait and see if Penn State can earn its second win of the season on Saturday against Rutgers at SHI Stadium. For Brooke Steach and Jeremy Ganes, I'm Emily Treacy. Thanks for watching and have a great night.